And we move now to our next speaker, Sanjay Dhar from the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts in New Delhi. He's a distinguished specialist in the conservation of wall paintings, who's made a significant contribution to their ongoing preservation in the Himalayan region. He received his training in conservation in India and Italy, and his doctorate from the Courtauld Institute of Art in London. He's consulted for many international organizations and was instrumental in establishing the Art Conservation Center of the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage in New Delhi. He'll be speaking to us today about tradition and modernity, the care of Buddhist material heritage.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here, and it's been really fun and great games so far. Basically, what I'm talking about is based on my experience over the last 20-25 years in the Himalayan region. And the way I'm presenting it is sort of taking vignettes out of my experience, and then let's trying to put it all together, hopefully in the end. Sometimes I think I've got it, sometimes it sort of slips since yesterday. Okay. Contradiction is inherent to the idea of conserving Buddhist material heritage. Attachment to physical things or people is a major impediment for achieving enlightenment. Yet here we are strategizing how best to do so. And how does this change? Okay. The geographical extent of my paper is restricted to the Himalayan region, though Mahayana Buddhism extends well beyond this landmass. The word conservation is used in its native context and includes epithets Western and scientific. When referring to other cultures, including mine, I prefer to use words from the language, or if possible, a close description whenever it's possible. Negotiating different cultures is difficult at the best of time. It is even more so with preconceived notion and a well-formed idea of what needs to be done when you're just out of college. But that should not last, and I'm sharing my experiences and some understanding from over 20 years of learning in Ladakh. An important question that needs to be asked as conservator is, what is our mandate? Do we have skin in the game to make long-term decisions, or rather to make long-term irreversible decisions? And what are the available resources that can and should inform choices? This is the site of a UNESCO workshop for working professionals from the Himalayan countries. Every day, this lady, I have marked her very nicely, would pass from under the stupa, and as she emerged, she would tell us, you're all going to end up badly or dead. You are disturbing the gods. And this carried on for 12 days of the 15-day workshop. Every day at same time, she came like clockwork past the Chorten, and as she would walk out, she would mumble this sentence. On the 13th day, she said, you're done well, and the gods will be happy. She seemed to be happy, and we let out a sigh of relief. This made me actually aware that our work has consequences not only for us, but for others too. Around the same time, I was working on a project to restore the wall paintings inside the small temple that you see on the left-hand side, built to Maitreya, that has a fierce and wrathful manifestations. Despite ensuring that the gods were removed, there's a ceremony to remove the gods before we can do anything to them. So This is part of that ceremony when the spirit is taken out into a mirror, and that mirror is kept in a particular corner of the temple till the work is completed. Sorry. So despite making sure that the gods were not there, one was never too sure. And every day I would make sure I got the news from the village. It was a 50-house village. And I would regularly check like clockwork what's happened in the village. If there's been an accident, has someone died? Has there been something wrong in the village? And this continued for the entire period. And this was a sort of a longish project. I must admit, I've never said so many prayers as I did while working there. Much of this may sound far-fetched in this room, but it is not, because there's a strong belief system that must be respected. The paintings on the wall is not a representation, but the very embodiment of the deity. So here you have the head of the Drukpa Kagyupa sect in Ladakh, Lama Saksan Raspa, painted in the 18th century on the Tangkha, and the photographed in the 21st century. So both are the same, and it is the same person. All this is a matter of faith, of course. This is a picture outside of Jokhang in Lhasa, and the stone floor has deep runnels, which have been made by people prostrating in front every day. So when you look at that, you get a sense of faith, and it's a different appreciation of what faith means. Or if you look at this, this is how these huge monuments have been built at these high altitude places. Huge lines of human lines are made, and they pass on stones from one place to another, covering mountains, actually. On top is an ongoing project where they are going to place the sculpture of Saksang Raspa. It's a huge sculpture. I'll show you the picture later. And below is a project where they actually covered a whole hill in stone because the hill was collapsing. Or here we have an archivist's nightmare. This is a 400-year-old manuscript which goes out every spring before they start farming, and it goes all over the village, and there is reading at every sort of location in the village. And this 400-year manuscript is doing very well, despite its so many years of village travels. And here is a painting that was restored, and you can see the before and after. Obviously, there's nothing to see before. And once it was restored, this is the Dorje Chenmo shrine in She. And these are the visitors to the shrine after the restoration. And this is something, that gives immense satisfaction. And perhaps this is what our work is about. Visitors getting the first glimpse of the deity Dorje Chenmo, which was for me a hugely satisfying and an educative moment. But that was not all, because I needed something more. And that more came from the oracle of Dorje Chenmo from the same temple. And the oracle certified that she was happy with the work and we had done well, which gave us a lot of footing in our future work in Ladakh. So all these things matter. Now, from faith to tradition. Yesterday, there was a mention about the different sutras that mention how to take care of things and so on and so forth. I'm just giving a few examples from the Vinaya Sutra. Vinaya Sutras were, so they're supposed to have been enunciated by the Buddha himself and during his lifetime. So these are the laws that govern the Sangha, the Buddhist order. And in that, if you look at some of the highlights that I've put, you'll see that these are nice and good housekeeping rules. Let him clean the vihara if he's able to do so. When cleaning the vihara, let him first take away the alms bowl and the robe and lay them aside. Let him turn down the bed, take it away properly without rubbing it against the floor and without knocking it against the door or doorpost, and put it aside. And it goes on. But the awareness of environment is also there. Almost 1500 or 2000 years back. If dusty winds blow from the east, let him shut the windows on the east. If dusty winds blow from the west, let him shut the windows on the west. If it is cold weather, let him open the windows by day and shut them at night. If it is hot weather, let him shut the windows by day and open them at night. And so on. It talks about how to fold a robe and on and on. And I've just compared it to a good old 19th century British housekeeping manual. And if you compare it, they just sit together very well. Now, within the Sangha, it's a very well organized system. They have the position of a storekeeper, and the storekeeper is pretty high. It's not someone very low in the hierarchy. It's usually someone who is sort of third or fourth in position from the top. So a very, very important person. And this is the store in Hemis, which is considered to be one of the richest monasteries in the region. And this was the keeper. I don't think he's around anymore. And besides the Sangha, besides the Buddhist order, the other important part of the equation is the community that took care of the temples and monasteries and the material heritage. And here you have the youth who formed a dramatic club, and they would go and perform religious theater in villages to collect money, and that money was plowed into the temple repairs and maintenance. So that's how you have in Ladakh 1,000-year-old paintings still surviving, 1,000-year onwards, all the way up to now. And if you see that temple, that ruined temple on my left, your right, perhaps, that is the temple where I said my prayers every day. So that was the situation it was in, and it was restored by the community, and then we were called in. So they did not do, they understood that they did not have the capacity to conserve the paintings. So they called in professionals, did what they knew well, which was the buildings. And this building here, this whole mountain or a hill has been completely covered with a retaining wall because there was a lot of erosion which would have pulled this temple down. And all the money was raised by them through different activities. It was enough for them to take on a Wilson challenge where the grant was matched almost to the tune of $100,000. So all that money was collected by them and put over a period of 6 to 7 years. Now, if we, there was mention of, I think Anupam mentioned our treatises. And he rightly mentioned that our treatises don't give details of how to paint and what to paint and so on and so forth. They're not very precise in the way that, say, an Italian treatise is. What they do instead is they inform the patron of the difficulties of performing any art. Say, for example, if there's painting, the patron is told that a painter has to first learn dance, he has to learn music, and he has to practice his art, etc., before he can become a full sort of a good artist. So what happens is actually an ecosystem is built or was built. That was how the system functioned. There was an ecosystem where the patron was knowledgeable about what he was commissioning. The audience was knowledgeable because they were also treated to education in connoisseurship. They knew what they were looking at. And the artist, of course, learned his trade in whatever way he learned his trade. So there was a whole ecosystem within which things used to function. And that is what made the difference. And the disruption of that is part of the problem. Now, coming to the artists or craftsperson artists, as I mentioned that there's an ecosystem and the patron and the relationship between the patron and artist is very important. This is a modern example. This is the person here standing under the horse is the sculptor. He has not trained in the traditional system. He is trained at an art college and then in the Banaras Hindu University Department of Sculpture. He was picked up by Drukchen, who is the head of the Drukpa, which is the second biggest sect after the Yellow sect, which is headed by the Dalai Lama himself. So he's the second most important person in the Tibetan lineage. He picked this artist up and first gave him several smaller commissions and then commissioned him to do this equestrian sculpture of Sengye Namgyal. Sengye Namgyal was the ruler of Ladakh, supposedly the golden period of Ladakh. And after that, now he has given him the commission for which the pedestal was being made that I showed you earlier. And the sculpture on the two huge sculpture, this is Taksan Raspa, the head of the Drukpa I had shown you. So, and I've been in touch with Sering, and Rinpoche has been Drukchen Rinpoche has been giving him notes, discussing what is going to happen, checking his maquettes, and having a conversation. It's not as if he's not doing what he wants. He's not totally following exactly what Drukchen has told him. He has the freedom to do what he, as an artist, he wants to do, and he's very particular about it. But at the same time, there's a conversation that's going on. And that is something that must have happened before also. This is Lama Stobgis from Likhir. I had put in a photograph of Likhir, but it seems I've given the wrong one. Anyway, this was at a time when his eyesight was not very well, and he's no more now. But he had started painting on furniture because his eyesight was not good. But He was responsible for painting Likhir Monastery, which is one of the important monasteries in Ladakh, to an extent that there's not even a single old painting left in that monastery. Everything has been repainted. These are people that I have had the privilege of interacting and talking to, learning from them and working with at times. This is Gem Namka. He's a Tibetan artist. He survived the Cultural Revolution. And then once things eased out in China, he came back to Minyak from the region in Sichuan province to which he belonged. And under the patronage of the Rinpoche, the head of the order, he started training people, and eventually there were enough trained people in that region to who could be commissioned to paint a monastery. And on the other side is Wangdus Olthang, a very, very senior artist in Ladakh, now deceased, but he has painted in many, 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 many monasteries all across Ladakh, part of which would be restoration. And he would say that, you know, I don't like working on old masters. I don't like working on paintings that have been already done because they're done so well. And I find it difficult, but what to do? Rinpoche orders me around and I can't say no to him. This is a project that, again, that small temple gave me a lot of sleepless night. This is a figure of Tsongkhapa, which had been painted by somebody who just walked in and saw that it was damaged. So he painted, he had got gold paint and did what he did. And when we were restoring it, we thought that this wasn't working too well and we should sort of return it back. At least the community wanted that it should be as it ought to be. So we call this artist Sering again. He's the student of Lama Stobgis that I showed you from Likhir. And when he started, you can see that he has got his cap back and all that. But when he was working throughout, as he was working, he was reciting the mantra of Tsongkhapa. This is the image of Tsongkhapa, the head founder of the Yellow Sect. And this went on and on till he finished it. So this is how it came out in the end. Again, the same temple, and this is an area that we were able to recover, but there were gaps in the calligraphy. So we called in a calligrapher, and he then read out the inscriptions and figured out the lost areas and then helped us fill in the lost areas. So these are collaborations with artists that, following our own system, following a sort of studied conservation approach, one can and should possibly do in this sort of situation. I don't know. And then there are the sort of the last category of artists, which is the itinerant sort of monks who know painting. They'll go over or be called into someone's house. They'll stay there through the winter. The winters are long, cold. They'll be given food, a room to stay in, and they'll do furniture, walls, paint a tankha, or do whatever they're asked. And they stay for a full winter by and large, or they may go to a couple of houses in the same village but not move outside. So these are the type, more or less the range of craftsmen, artists that you're likely to encounter. And this is here a new commission in the village of Igu. There was a temple up on the hill, but because there was water shortage, so they had to vacate that, and they came down and rebuilt the temple and moved the gods to this new temple. Now, just to show you that the craftsmen worked in teams, as we know they do everywhere. If you look at the images on top, they are from a cave site and from the 14th century. And on one side, you see the strokes are quite firm and well formed, and on the other side, they're sort of rushed. And so there you can make out, and these are just 3 centimeter sort of medallions, both of them, and multiple medallions that have been painted. So one can see that there's a master craftsman's hand and another hand out there. And this is work done by us. So we also could approach the subject. And just as this is one of my favorite slides, Mason's tool from Central Asia from the 7th, 8th century, that many of you probably recognize. Quite a few of these implements tells us that things haven't changed as much as they seem to have changed. And so much as things change, they still remain the same. Thank you.
We have some time for questions now.
I was really fascinated with your discussion about how when you were doing restoration work, like at the stupa and at the other cave temples, how you had to get the gods' approval for that to make sure that they were happy that you did it right. What would have happened if they weren't happy?
I would have lost my job. That's a short answer. But it would be difficult because then people, you're living in a village which is 10 people, 15 people, 50 houses. Then you would be constantly pointed out. And you would have to deal with that, which isn't really nice in a 15 people village. So basically, I would have had to pack up and go home, I think.
What would have constituted villagers not being happy with the work? Would it be something that the restoration work took away from what they were used to seeing, or?
No, sorry if I've got that wrong. It was not my work that was under this microscope. It was the gods judging my work and then doing something to them. That would ricochet on me. So that was the worry. It wasn't so much the villagers judging my work. They were very happy with me. I'm a likable person. Yeah.
I think this young man standing by his work, one seemed to be an enormous tall sculpture.
Yes.
And then there seemed to be either two sculptures or two views of the same sculpture in white. Were they in cement or stone or what?
They are, it's a clay stucco sculpture. It's one of the tallest sculptures in the region. It goes about, I think, no, this is, it goes about 15 or 20, 30 meters or so.
But this was a new piece he had done, yes?
No.
Oh, it was a...
Oh, are you talking about the white one or?
Both of them. It was a tripartite slide. There was white chap, and a very tall...
Oh, that's the new one.
This here. Yeah. What is the medium?
This is isn't plaster of Paris right now. It is
Uh-huh.
going to be cast in bronze this April. I had written that, I didn't read that. It's going to be cast in bronze in the coming months.
And the one on the left,
They're both the same.
all plaster of Paris?
Yeah, it's a
Gosh.
huge one.
Thank you.
He's been working at it. He first did a maquette. This is the plaster of Paris. This is going to go into lost wax, and then he's going to cast.
That's going to go into lost wax?
Not all, the surface.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you say something about the interplay between the professionally trained conservator and the local people doing the work in their ways?
See, basically when they do it, we don't come to know about it. And when we are doing it, they all know about it. And the thing is that because you are not a Ladakhi, so no matter what you do, there's always some problem that they can find. And when a Ladakhi does something like this, it's still acceptable. Nobody will complain. So I did make that point once. I said, you know, I've been around for a while, and you would never say anything to this chap who did this. But if I'm even make a squiggle somewhere and you're just going to catch hold of me. What they said was that we think that the Ladakhis or the locals know the iconography, iconometry, etc., etc. Therefore, they're going to get it right. I said, but that doesn't work, because the iconography that the local knows is today's proportions, which are slightly different stylistically. And what you're looking at is 400 years old. So I understand that difference. He doesn't understand that difference. He'll make it like today. I'll make it like that 400 years old. So they gave it a thought. I think they let it pass for the time being. So they accepted that argument. But that's constantly a struggle. Acceptance.
I mean, without pushing the point too hard, this is not so different from where we left off with Professor Menon at the end. I mean, this is a ruin that was revived to live in the present, but it's lost its historical.
This one, because it is in worship, or it is in worship still, is not lost. He is there. As long as he is there, it's not lost. Tsongkhapa is there in that image.
But to you, professional, that's not the 400-year-old.
That one is follows the design of the 400-year-old image.
So would you say
Sorry.
that these are two separate images, separate locations?
No, they're the same.
The same one. So
the-
that's the point.
They're the
I thought you were saying that the contemporary person making the restoration does not have the awareness of the 400-year-old slight differences.
no here, because I was overseeing it, so I sort of.
Yeah, but still
You
the
can't
question
push that
still
one.
remains
Huh?
that the question is still there, that 400-year-old historic.
This is not for that face is that was done by somebody.
So nothing else has been changed. But if it was, then as a professional for you, that 400-year-old historic fabric would have been altered a little bit, no?
Of course, that's been altered here before I came.
Yes.
I'm not responsible for that. I just make it look like that. Because you can't have it without either one lets it be as this or one goes there. I think the choice is not too hard.
They just move it.
Huh? Yeah.
But so I'm curious because when you presented this image, the first one on the left, you explained that a villager or someone else had come in and repainted this, right? In an act of reverence.
Yes.
But that it was decided that this was not sufficient, and therefore there was the repainting. But what you're saying now, it sounds like actually perhaps you convinced them that perhaps this was not appropriate.
No.
So
I
the
might
villagers
have,
came to
I'm
you.
not
and-
very sure. I can be persuasive sometimes, so I'm not very sure. No, this was something that they were very sure they didn't want.
Okay.
Because it just doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. And this is a very, very important figure.
Right, Tsongkhapa.
Tsongkhapa is a very, very important figure. And I think we all missed one major point I wanted to ask that yesterday, which is that within our Shastric traditions, there is something that if your image is not right, then instead of good, bad will happen. So if you make an image which is not in right proportion, it is not having the right implements and dress the way it is described, or proportions, or if the eye instead of looking right is looking left, this will happen to the king. If it is sort of his face is falling down, then there will be a drought in the region. So there are quite serious consequences for them. I think this one merits. It's not too many things would happen.
We have time for one more question before the break.
Maybe just a quick question about the categories, because we are using Western categories to speak about all the youth operation. We have tradition, modernity, and conservation. And it seems to me the words that maybe the people there would use for expressing the reworking or on the images are lost. So if the people would describe this sort of operation, which word or concept they would use? Not conservation, I suppose. Revitalization, I don't know, but that's a problem. Huh? We use the same category to try to say something different. And I'm really curious to know about the self-description in this other context.
See, in this particular case, I won't be able to really help because I was looking after it and they had called me. As I mentioned that they had taken care of the building themselves and they called in the professionals to do the paintings, knowing what it meant. So it was not a random decision. It was a very well thought out decision to call in a wall painting person in. So in that sense, this was part of conservation. Whether it was strictly, I should have left this or we should have done something else.
What words would they have describe that act, for instance?
I think it would be repainting. Yes. Be repainting, which is something I would also, because I called him an artist and got him to do it. The last image was something that I did myself, but this one was done by me, but that one was not, because it's